Right then, home straight. Let's do it.
7 more episodes to go. And we start doing Big Finish.
Life is never long enough to reassess Big Finish. Hello, welcome back to part 3 of season 4 of Talking About Who. Hey, less fingers this time. We've done 2 previous parts, which you can obviously watch. And if you haven't watched, go and watch them before this, because it's ridiculous that you watch this part first. Currently in the lead with a whopping 24 points is Doctor Who and the Moon Base. But is that going to change with our final 3? I can't stop Ted Rogersing now. Can't stop Rogering. Too much. Yeah, you can't see what they're doing. They're both Rogering away as well. So I am Paul or P-Bal, and it's lovely to see you. And I can't really see you, but I can probably see you at Lavender Fuzzy. It's horrible about me. And I'm obviously joined by.
Hello, I am James. Is that what you were doing?
You look more like you're doing Susan in An Unearthly Child.
And hello, I'm Jason, and I'll do a 3, 2, 1 as well, if that counts.
Well, there's no 3, 2, 1 counting because we are straight into it, and we have got Doctor Who and the Macra Terra.
And what a way to start this last part. Giant crabs in a holiday camp? No, not one of my holidays. Before you both say it, because I know what you're like.
Island?
No, not one of my holidays. Yeah. It's the Macra Terra. And it's another lost story. Again, sadly, but we can obviously enjoy this one as an animation. Okay, so the Macra Terra. There are some stories this season that I think work really, really well, and there are some stories that I don't think work quite so well. And unfortunately, the Macra Terra is one of them. I think there's a great idea behind here somewhere, but I just don't think it's realized so much in the script or potentially in the way that the story is told. Now, obviously, again, we don't have the visuals, so it's very difficult for us to know whether or not there are some lovely hidden gems in here. And there are some camp old bits in here, and I'll come to in a moment. Ian Stuart Black has written what I think is another dystopian story. It follows on a little bit from The Savages. So, he wrote The Savages, and this is a story that's in a similar vein. But the problem you've got with the Macra Terra is it's tied round a monster that realistically isn't doing very much and isn't really, and almost feels like isn't an integral part of the whole piece. So I think it's letting itself down because it's trying to tie itself to something that it isn't. And I think if they've just played it on some of the campness and some of the sort of, so there's some really nice bits in here, like the refreshing department and, Jamie doing the Highland fling to escape. And there's a big dance thing at the end. Again, none of these visuals we can realistically see. I just think this story just doesn't connect. And that's personally probably a thing. I mean, again, I probably could wave the Marmite round for this, the extra old Marmite for this, because this might be somebody's, they might absolutely adore it. But unfortunately for me, Macra Terra is just a little bit of a dropped moment here, I think, in this season.
Yeah, I think this story suffers a little bit of the 3 companions that we've been talking about some of the other stories, because I find it quite jarring that Ben ends up being hypnotized and then working against him. It's kind of like, oh, we need to do something with all the characters, so we're going to have him be hypnotized, but then he's still with Polly, even though he's against them. He ends up still teaming up with Polly. Jamie is somehow sort of immune or wakes up during the hypnotization, so he's okay. He can go off with the Doctor. There just feels to me there's too many companions in this story that they're never quite sure what to do with all of them, which detracts for me from some of the rest of the story. Yeah, I do agree that the Macra itself isn't necessarily a formidable foe. You know, in the original there was only one prop for it, which they just had to keep reusing. I know in the animation you see more, but that part of the story never quite gets going. I mean, the sort of political thing where you've got Pilot who sort of, on the one hand, has been really nice to them and saying, "Oh, come into the refreshment area," and blah blah blah, blah. And at the same time is taking orders from someone else, and you know, again, it's not necessarily something new. You know, we've seen a little bit of that in Evil of the Daleks, for example, where, you know, the Daleks are plotting behind the scenes. You know, so that's not exactly fresh for this season either. And for me, the Macra is nowhere near as sinister or you know, as devious as the Daleks in that story.
I disagree with you both. I think actually the Macra is quite a great looking monster. I think I'm also going to go out on a limb and say I think John Davies, whilst if you look at some of the photos, well, there's literally one photo. I think there's two photos, but they're just a second apart. Just that fraction apart. I think he shot from the tally snaps. I think he shot what he had actually really well. I think there's the cliffhanger, and it's where it's in the darkness. When in doubt, drop the lights, and it's going to help you. I think Jason knows that well. I think that works in this, and I like a lot of that stuff where the Doctor goes out and there's the notion that there's this sort of ruined bits just outside where they're scuttling about. I think I don't know whether people necessarily have a phobia of crabs in the same way they have a phobia of snakes or something, but I don't think people necessarily like crabs. Nobody, I mean, perhaps there could be dear viewer, lots of you out there that adore them, but majority of people, they find them a bit creepy, the sort of scuttly, the shell. There is a sort of a phobia to play on there. So I think I like that, and I think also of the era, campsites, holidays, your Heidi-Hi, Map Plans, whatever. It was a bigger thing. It was culturally a much bigger thing than it is now. I mean, I suppose you still have holiday camps or a haven holiday or something, but it's a very identifiable thing to have what is on the outside quite. You could associate with that. You could associate with that being your holiday, and there being something horrible happening behind the scenes. And I like that, and I like. There's lots of lovely motifs. I like the little jingles and the marching. Big shout out, obviously, to our Phantom legend, Maureen Lane, who is the head of the Majorettes. We love Maureen. So I like that. I like the holiday camp element. I like the monster element. And you know, James has got the pitch there. I like all the stuff with the young looking on screen, and then you get I like. There's a lot of nice. I mean, it's not amazing. It's not a blowaway classic, but I do think it's actually an enjoyable story.
Yeah, I've got to say, not even the animation lifted it for me. I've been often said I struggle with the recons, although I have gone through the recons for this season where we don't have animations. Even the animation doesn't quite do it for me. Actually, I think if we had the original back, again, as I said, I'd be more than open to reevaluating my position on it. I think you're right. John Davies had some challenges. The Macra turned up from Shorecraft, and it had to be mounted on the back of a lorry, and it was pretty immobile. So he's trying to he's trying to film it, so he's lit it well. He's lowered the lights. He's done and actually, there's a couple of sensor clips that have come to light that actually are quite visual and quite scary. You know, you've got sort of Ben and Polly there, and they're reacting to sort of what's going on around them. So again, I wonder if my position on this would change. But as a standalone story, as it works in the way that I follow it in the narrative, I actually prefer the Savages to this story. So I mean, I like Ian Stuart Black's writing broadly. I just don't get this story. Maybe there's just something in this I don't get. I don't know.
Interesting, I suppose, as Ian brought in Ben and Polly, It's not strong for Polly. Again, I'm slightly fixated on this now. She's quite screamy in a way that she wasn't in the War Machines. It's interesting because you can't blame the writer not having a grasp of the character when he originated the character. It's just a bit weird that he's not playing to the strengths there. Yeah, it does suffer again from having too many companions, and that's a problem which is quite brutally eradicated in the next story. But no, surprisingly, it's one of the few animations I've actually not minded. I watched the color version, I watched the whole thing, and that was all right. I quite liked it, so I worked it through. My first encounter of this story was actually, this is nostalgia, folks, when the BBC did the audio cassettes, and you had really hissy, quiet soundtracks with really loud narration from Colin Baker over the top. So you sort of turn the stereo to hear what they were saying, and then the narration would come in and it would blow your ears. Children today don't have to worry about that because they've got recons and they've got nice, beautifully clean soundtracks. In the olden days, we had to suffer with ear damage. So I don't know. I think it's a nice little 4-part. I would be surprised if someone said to me, my favourite story of all time is the Macra Terra. I don't know if there's something in there that would draw that out of anyone.
I think from watching this again, I actually prefer the black and white animation to the colour version. And I don't know whether that is, like you say, that the Macra are sort of hiding in the shadows and sort of on the outskirts of this holiday camp in the sort of ruins in this gas, and I can understand that being quite visual when you see like the picture behind me with the giant claw just comes out and grabs them, and they had to make the best use of the props, and I guess for me I just don't find the idea of a giant crab that scary in that respect. And I just remember, Gridlock when they brought them back, and it was like, of all this, I mean, come on, could have been the Quarks, but for all the sort of like aliens that you bring back the Macra in that episode. It's kind of,
but they were devolved Macra, weren't they?
They were devolved Macra, because in this story they've taken over this colony. They're able to sort of infiltrate.
They're clever crabs.
They are clever crabs, but again, it's something that we've already seen before in this season, with the sort of like background malevolence, and when you get to the sort of like, okay, it's this giant crab in the shadows, it doesn't have the same scare or the same sort of impact for me in that respect.
But you look at the. I'll come back to the clip, the missing sensor clip. So this is where I'm prepared to be a bit more open to this. And that missing sensor clip, actually, that's presented really well. It's shot well. It's lit well. The menace is in that shot. So potentially, it could have been there, James.
It could have been there, and it could be that the animation doesn't give it, its proper atmospheric feeling. But like I say, there are things about the plot that I still don't necessarily like either. Like Ben being hypnotized and everything. I find that they're trying to do something with them.
But I think this gives Ben a chance to shine a little. The character of Ben, obviously, he's clearly under the sort of gas brainwashing thing that they're going on. So, he's submissive because of the hypnotization, but he gets to play against his normal character. And so there are one or two things that lift this story, and I think the way that Mike Craze plays this, again, I think sits pretty well.
It does, but then going back to what Paul was saying about Polly, she just falls into line with him. She just like, oh, okay, you've changed sides, so I'm going to stick with you. I don't know. For me at this point, it's just like there are too many of you, and I want to really focus on the Doctor finding out what's going on with Pilot and everything else. The rest of it seems a little bit just padding in a way.
I mean, on the visual front, I mean, we've obviously discussed the monster and all that sort of thing. But I mean, we're back to Pat Troughton and his performance, and the scene where he has we call it the rough and tumble, where he has they comb his hair and clean him up. And you sort of only imagine that actually the comedy and the performance in that, and little moments like that, all sort of combine, I think, to make something, you know, enjoyable.
And of course, cut from the animation.
I want my license fee back now.
Yeah, there's a few things where the animation takes slight sort of differences, because in the original telecast, Polly's hair changes because she had a haircut, so she gets a haircut in the refresher room, which explains why she's got shorter hair in the later stories. But in the animation, she's got the short hair from the very beginning of the story, so they've cut that sort of sequence out, you know, and I'm sure it didn't necessarily add anything other than explaining why her hair was suddenly shorter. But there's little things like that.
They don't explain why she's wearing a wig in the next one, do they?
No, they don't explain that.
But, you know, you can, there are those sort of, you know, some of those liberties, shall we say, where they've changed those bits.
There's something I find quite eerie, I think, about this whole colony of the model of perfect happiness. There's the perfect happiness here. For me, there's no such thing as perfect happiness. So I always find that quite a disturbing view, that you would have this, and there's clearly got to be something behind it that's manipulating this to be the case.
Oh, you're such an old cynic. No such thing as perfect happiness.
Exactly. If you never watched Eurovision. Peter Jeffrey, I think in this he's quite under. I'm surprised. It's sort of surprised because he I mean, again, usually sort of star villain, and he's not really the villain of the piece this time. So it's interesting to see that. Yeah, again, it's that really odd thing of I don't think I can scream at applauding and saying he's amazing and I love about it, but there's, you know, there's nothing I particularly dislike. I can't think of something I dislike about it. I do think it's a very solid thing. I think we've hit a good run on the stories now. I think they're pretty much sure of where they're at, and I think this is quite assured. I mean, yes, there are questions over how they're handling having so many companions. But as a 4-part sort of adventure serial, it's hitting everything you need, I think. Have we got any stats that you'd like to present us with on Dr. Macra Terra?
This was the first of the new title sequences, and it was supposed to have the new Delia Derbyshire theme, but it didn't. There was an error, so that doesn't appear until the second episode of the next story. To go along with the new titles. There was only one Macra prop, so they filmed the original scenes and then they painted it a different color to become the sort of leader crab for the final scenes. So yeah, so it was kind of shoestring budget.
Why would the leader crab? It's a big question. Why would the leader crab need to be white? Surely they would all be the same color.
I don't know.
Got a spray tan in the colony. That's because he's the badass, you see. But I'm going to get me some spray tan.
The one good thing about the animations for me then on this story is that I think the animations can add to the story. They can give it a visual that it doesn't have. And I don't know how you guys sit on this, whether you think the animation should be reflective of potentially what you were watching there in the first place, or whether the animation should be something where you can let the imagination go a little bit and try and add an extra dimension to the story.
I think it should be like, I think it should be more around the imagination. You know, for me, this harks back to sort of like 1950s B movies where you would just see the claw. You know, it would all be missed. You wouldn't actually see the crab very much. It would just be the sudden attack, and then that would be it. For me, that would make more sense. It would make the Macra seem more genuinely frightening. rather than, and again, this is not to detract from it, but the animation where you see the crab sort of scuttling around in the, you know, the sort of ruins, I just like, oh, it's a crab. You know, there wasn't the eeriness of, you know, like that. This picture, for example, if it was like that, great. You know, if it was, you know, someone stumbling around and then suddenly a big claw came out and killed them, fine. I like the air of mystery rather than seeing a crab scuttling around.
I think you do see a lot of just the claw there, don't you? I think there's a lot
you do
of
to begin with.
In there.
Yeah.
But it's the same with most Doctor Who things, isn't it? When it's just a hand or just a shadow, it's always sort of more rewarding than the moment it steps out into the full arc light and it's like, oh, I haven't stitched that properly. You know, there's inevitability, I think, with that. Animation-wise, I've sort of on the point of I prefer a telesnap reconstruction. I think it's more true to what's it's got to. I mean, it's a picture of the actual thing. Animation, because they don't often necessarily look entirely like whoever they're doing animation of, or the movement's a bit weird. You might as well just go the whole hog. I'm not saying completely redesign, but I think you can expand it to beyond the rigid. That's what the set was. You know, you can make the set bigger or whatever. I think that's fine because it's never going to be an accurate reconstruction of what was. So I think it's time to score the Macra. I'm going to score Macra. I'm going to start just because I think this is going to kick the life into this. I think it's great. I think it'd be quite an enjoyable story to have back. I would love to see more of it. I think the censor clips have got a real flavour of how this would have rolled atmosphere-wise. I even enjoyed the animation, which is saying something. So I'm giving the Macra Terra 7.
Oh, okay. That's a great score for that.
Okay, well,
you both look like you're comatose. It's like, come on, Team Macra.
No, great. I love the fact it's 7. I'll go next, actually, if you like. So I'm not quite in the same place as you are on this story.
Where's your Marmite?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I think the Marmite does need to come out for this because I think you are the one side of the Marmite, I'm the other side of the Marmite on this. But it's not the worst piece of Doctor Who, okay? And I do think if we had it in its real form, again, I think this is another one where I think I would score it differently. But where I'm going to score it is how I see it. I don't find it terribly engaging as a story, and I'm not entirely convinced about the Macra as a menace. So there are a couple of things in there that I don't like. But on the other hand, I think there are some great set pieces in there, some lovely campness in there, I think. And, you know, there's a bit of a dystopian storyline there that I kind of can buy into. So for me, I'm going to go middle of the road on this. It's a 5.
Oof. Oof. It's silenced, James, your 5 has. It's silenced him.
It has. So I'm going to be slightly less crabby than Jason, but not as enthusiastic as yourself, Paul. And I rated the Macra Terra a 6.
Gosh, see, look, I'm the voice of positive optimism, aren't I?
You are.
Say what you like. It's not even Douglas Adams, and I'm being nice about it all.
We're all over it. We love that. We don't mind it.
So Macra Terra finishes with 18 points. So we're now off to Gatwick Airport for the Faceless ones. So who wants to talk about the Faceless ones first? I'm lucky I can say that at this juncture.
James, I think it's you to start on this one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Your turn, James.
So, yes, we are on the runway of Gatwick Airport and a trip with Chameleon Tours. But again, all is not what it seems. So, yeah, it's we're finally going to solve the conundrum of having too many companions by getting rid of Polly and Ben in this one. So this is Polly and Ben's last story. The end, they realise that they're back in their own time, and they're only in episodes 1, 2, and 6, I believe, because they kind of pretty much wrapped up. You don't get them for the whole story. We do get some great cast members, and I wanted to do a quick shout out to Wanda Bentham and Donald Pickering, who would later go on to be in Time of the Rani as husband and wife. Some great cast members in there. So essentially people are going missing, being abducted on their holidays, and the Doctor and the TARDIS crew are going to investigate and find out what's going on.
Fantastic. I think this is proper 60s Doctor Who. You've got that epic opening shot of the TARDIS materializing on the runway at Gatwick. But it sets the story off almost immediately. They walk out of the doors and they're literally scattered to the four sides of Gatwick. And you're straight into the action. And I think here, for my opinion, David Ellis and Malcolm Hulke have delivered actually quite a kicking script. It's a 6-part, and I'm sure just suffer a little bit occasionally, but it's a great story, actually, with quite a menacing premise in it. So, you've got this sort of mystery that builds through the first couple of episodes. Then it sort of almost starts to reveal itself as to who's behind it and what's going on. And then you ultimately lead up to the sort of this end piece at the end where they realize chameleons are behind it and so on and so forth. But it's a great, typical 6-part Doctor Who story from the 1960s. We're lucky to have a couple of parts of this. So we do have 1 and 3. So it's great to have an opening episode. I always think it's nice to sort of see that, particularly with the visuals at the beginning. 3 sets the scene where you get that nice little shot of the sort of, them being abducted on the airplane. So all told, I like the Faceless ones. I think it's a great little story.
Faceless ones is one I've always enjoyed listening to, one of my runs. If I was going to be unkind for a brief moment, heaven forfend, the Chameleon's plot, there's a lot of holes in that. There's a lot of holes in this notion of let's keep everybody in a car in the car park at Gatwick and hope that they stay there whilst we keep their body for however. There are certain logistical flaws that if you sit there and think, well, that just doesn't make sense. And surely you'd have all the duplicates and there are a lot of flaws. If you don't think about the logic of the plot too hard, it's enjoyable. I mean, there's always something fun to be had when you do the doppelganger thing, and the sort of who's alien, who's not alien. Nurse Pinto's a really sort of underrated sort of villain character in this, because you get the portrayal of really nasty, and then when the real one comes out, she's really nice, and I like those sort of twists. And there's also the nice nod, isn't there, when Jamie's duplicated and he hasn't got a Scottish accent, and I think that's just quite a sweet sort of thing to do. I mean, the big thing, I suppose, in some ways, is that whilst they've ditched Ben and Polly, I mean, quite brutally, there's no hiding the fact that they have literally just gone, you know what, you're gone. We shot you on film, and you can come back for one scene at the end of this.
Yeah.
It's Pauline Collins. I mean, there's the notion that Samantha might become the new companion, which is funny because actually Pauline Collins, I mean, you either get posh Pauline Collins or you get Cockney Pauline Collins, or Scouser Pauline. Those are her 3 options that come on the spotlight. And she's doing her pre-Shirley Valentine here. I think plucky and fun, I think, for this story. I think if she'd gone on, I think much like in Upstairs Downstairs, I'd have been like, can she go? And then she goes and she still comes back. I love her in some things, and I don't love her in other things. I think this character probably wouldn't be something I'd have been hankering more of.
But not even when she starts flirting with Jamie? Would you not like to have seen more of that?
No, I mean, I'd have loved to see more of her hat. She has one of the most iconic Doctor Who hats.
We love a good hat.
Love a hat. I mean, it's probably second to Liz Shaw in Ambassadors and just above the Archimandrite in Androids of Tara. I think those are your iconic Doctor Who hats.
James, I'm surprised you haven't cosplayed this.
Yeah, where's your Samantha cosplay?
I'm sadly disappointed by it in an odd way.
You could have a little checkout desk, couldn't you? A little Chameleon Tours check-in desk. You disappointed the audiences.
You're not on form here. You're like summer season 4. We've lost you in the archives.
There's no wig. You'd have had a wig with the hat.
Yes, I could have. I went for something quite sort of straightforward today.
It's no wig, it's no cosplay.
No, I get the feeling we ain't seen the last of it just yet there. I think there's many more opportunities to come.
There will be further wigs in future.
Actually, though, what would
the wigs to come?
In the wigs to come.
I do wonder what she would have been like actually as a companion, because it's a bit like, would they have necessarily? I mean, I believe it is right that she was being lined up, and she didn't want to take on a longer term role, is my understanding. But again, I'm reading from stats here on this one, so I can't verify that. But I just wonder what it would have been like. I think that the interplay between her and Fraser, I think, would have been good. I think we could have dropped that flirty thing quite quickly, because we wouldn't have wanted any of that on board Metardis. Thank you very much. Back in the 60s, and I think that whole dynamic could have worked quite well. This is not New Who now, by the way, guys.
You prude. You absolute prude.
I know. We could have had a great dynamic between the two of them. As it was, we ended up with a fantastic connection between Debs and Fraser, and we'll talk about that further on, and have talked about it already in our season 5 review. I think it would have been an interesting choice. Yeah, you're right. And both Ben and Polly were ditched off fairly quickly here. Interestingly, they had contracted them to be in the first 2 episodes of Evil of the Daleks. So they literally did release them out of contract quite quickly here. So clearly there was a conscious decision taken. And again, this is all about the path of change. And in this season, we see quite a lot of change. So this is probably just another one of those decisions that they're making as they're trying to formulate, what the future of this looks like. And, it pays dividends for us in many respects when we get to season 5, which for me is a season of quite some sum.
Well, it's interesting. I had a little think about this, because we had a little break between parts. And I think this is the last moment in the production as it rolls with the regulars, where there is that kind of chaos of not quite following through or getting rid of, because you've had that moment with the John Wiles sort of run where it gets a bit messy, where he doesn't know what's happening with Dodo and she's treated badly and got in. Peter, I know, wasn't happy about how he left it, and there's a semblance of they don't quite deal with the companions properly. I mean, even Maureen wasn't happy, and she just came back and she was gone. So there is a sort of run there where people are sort of brought in, Katerina, etc., where it's sort of chaotic. There isn't a continuity or a sense of people running their course and going when they want to go, and that changes. That this is the last point, I think, for quite some time, where there is a chaos of Ben and Polly essentially going at the start of the story, coming back to say goodbye for 2 minutes, and then onwards. I mean, Debs very much chooses to go, and the story's built around her going. Patrick, Fraser, Wendy, they all go, and they all know they're going. It's all very set. It's all realised. I suppose you could argue Caroline John sort of somewhere in the middle there. Did she go? Did she not go? But as a rule, it doesn't feel as uncontrolled as this is. It's kind of like we've added someone else in. Oh shit, we've got to get rid of the other two. And what do we do with the stories? How do we keep them going?
Yeah, because I think the one with Caroline, the Caroline John decision, I think, because you were at 26 a year then, that was more of a control decision. But when you're at 44, 42, whatever, I mean, this is quite breakneck speed that they're doing these things at. They literally are having to make decisions on the fly on almost a week by week basis as to potentially where they want the direction of this to go. So I can understand that there probably was still quite a lot of chaos going on behind the scenes, because they were still adjusting to what their vision, Innes's vision of Doctor Who, was going to be as it moved forward.
It doesn't feel like they've written any of these stories for three companions. It's like someone in the background's gone, look, we've got a whole load of stories which have got two companions. We need to get back to having two companions because the three we can't sort of separate it out. And that's sort of, you're right, they ditched them basically in this story to reset back to two companions.
The interesting
about to do that,
because forthcoming, I mean, I talked about this a bit. I mean, it sounds like a name clunky, but I talked about this a lot with Debs because there was the theory that was brought forward in the sort of 90s when David Howe and Stammer's Walker, they all started bringing up the things of who had been cast for what, and they all of a sudden announced Debs wasn't the first choice for Victoria and someone else had been cast. Now, there's a story, and then people forget the was that Innes had brought her into the office and said, I'd love you to be the Doctor Who girl, but you're not experienced enough. Can you go away and come back when the time's right? And I can believe that. Because if you look at this juncture now, when they were doing the Faceless ones, they were hoping that Pauline Collins was going to stop on as the companion, which would mean there would still have been a character called Victoria in either of the Daleks, but she wouldn't have been the companion. So it'd be perfectly feasible you'd have cast Denise Buckley as Victoria in either of the Daleks, because she wasn't going to be the series regular. But when you then say, Pauline, you sure you're not stopping on because we can shoehorn you into this and give you half a Fraser's lines? And she goes, no, I'm off to do something else. You'd then be like, we need another companion. Well, it's obvious that Victoria is your companion from the next story, but we don't want Denise to be our regular actor.
Yeah.
Debs, this is the moment. Do you want to come and do this? So that makes an absolute logical sense within the schematic, I think, of the production. I mean, it's not verified by, word to word, but I think that is the fit for me.
But if you look at what we've talked about, where we've talked about there being this uncertainty behind the scenes, that's actually got some real strength behind it, that quite possibly is how it played out.
Yeah.
So that's and I'm going to put it in print so that becomes truth. I'll put it on Gallifrey base. It'll be fact by morning.
James will be telling us next there were quarks in this one.
It did started off, didn't it, as look, I'm going to go for the statos now. It started off live as set in a department store, didn't it? It was called The Big Store, so it was going to be set in a department store. But I suppose Airplanes is more fun, isn't it?
Oh, much more visual.
Unless it's the Avengers, because there's a lovely one in the department store in the Avengers that I adore. But I can't stop about the bloody Avengers tonight, but it's the right era for it,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Wanda Ventham was almost an Avengers girl. It all tallies up. Again, it's quite funny because Wanda is wonderful in it, but a lot of her stuff's later on as well. So again, it's the point where you have episodes, I'd love to see a bit more later on. And
also got to give a little call out here for Colin Gordon as the Commandant. Now, he and Pat, they play opposite each other so well. And they're bickering almost from the get-go in the way that they're playing. And I love Colin Gordon as an actor anyway. I mean, he's been a number 2 in The Prisoner, and I'm sure he's been in The Avengers. But, I think he just plays the part with that sort of authority and works well next to Wanda. And I'm also going to give a shout out to Bernard Kay. He's always very, very strong in anything that he's in. And he brings sort of D.I. Crossland to life here quite well for me. So I think it's a great ensemble cast around this one as well that actually helps to lift this story as well.
I'm not sure about Bernard's accent, though. That's quite shaky. I can see the approach. I've always sort of felt that as a little shaky on that front.
Oh, it's his pipe, though. Don't you think his pipe adds gravitas?
Pipe acting's always a winner. I think pipe acting is fine. I also get upset by glasses acting. Glasses on, glasses off, glasses. It's like, you don't wear glasses because you would not handle them like that. Pipe acting, I'm here for it. Look at Liz Shaw in the Probe videos. Pipe acting's the winner.
Yeah. Do you want some not so much stats, but some more Easter eggs?
I was going to say, have you got any stats left? I think we've chewed them all up as we've gone through this.
A shed load of Easter eggs in this one. So there are posters of Roger Delgado's Master.
Oh, are we doing the animation, not the real one?
No, we didn't like this the last time you did this.
I'm gonna carry on.
No, we didn't like it.
Is this fake faceless one? Is it the fakeless ones that you're talking about?
The Sasha's Master is in there. The Meddling Monk is in there. One for you, Paul, on the eye test. Big Ron is on the eye test. Just, throw that out there. Magpie Electronics feature, and in the newspaper it says War Machines defeated.
Does River Song turn up?
In the Big Finish version.
I mean, to be honest with you, I'm surprised we didn't have any pre-Hartnell Doctors in there as well, just to add extra spice to it.
Samantha is a pre-Hartnell Doctor. That's why she wouldn't travel with them. It all makes sense now. It all makes perfect sense. They get Pauline back for the box set.
I'm far too much of a traditionalist, I'm afraid. Sorry. Don't get this. Don't get it.
I think, my horror fact for this is that because they were filming at Gatwick, that there's a special thing for causing trouble was during filming. They gave the staff tickets to the Rolf Harris show. Well, I hope they kept the receipts on that one. Yeah, that was the true horror of the faceless ones. Anyway, Lisa, I don't know whether does YouTube redact that if that comes up in a thing. You might be flagged. If you forget the what's in, I think the chameleon design is quite good. We don't see too much of it, do we? We see much more later on, which obviously we can not see, and there's only one still, and sort of a bit of the back isn't in the episode. But I think they look good. I think I just like it, and I think I don't feel the sag with the 6-part on this one either. I don't think it lets up.
No, I think it's good.
And it makes use of the location really well, and the airplanes and all that stuff.
No, I think it's good. I think there's good pace here. I think in this one, it's not by no means. This isn't the worst 6-part for SAG at all. It's got quite a nice feel. There is actually fairly well a bit of a definitive sort of beginning, middle, end in this one, which is kind of nice. You get the sort of whole setup, then you get the whole piece that plays out in the middle, and then I think you get a reasonably good resolve. And actually, it isn't that whole just going to shoot them all out of the sky kind of resolve either, which is kind of nice.
And I always think Ben and Polly's exit, whilst it is literally sort of chopped in at the end, it's a nice exit for them, because they have sort of persistently said during the thing, "Are we back in '66?" Because they haven't wanted to get involved with this. I mean, when right back to the smugglers and they land, they're like, "Can we get a train back?" And then the next one's like, "With the North, not 1960." So they have wanted to get back. It's sort of a bit like Ian and Barbara. There has been a sort of notion that they've just wanted to get home rather than going for the adventures. So it's nice that they work out that they're the day after they've gone.
It literally is. Yes, it's the day after they've gone. So it's a nice fit back for them.
Tough day for London. I mean, that Votan could have ended up taking on the chameleons. Well, probably has in a box set. But it's a rough day for London. So that's nice. And it's also nice to segue into the next story that the Doctor hasn't mentioned that the TARDIS has gone missing, because obviously you'd have to keep Ben and Polly, and then they'd have too many companions in the next story as well. So it's a nice cliffhanger, I think, into the sort of finale. Mm-hmm. So are we cruising towards a score on the door here? Okay. Go on, James.
Wow, I gave the faceless ones a 7.
7.
Okay. One of the ones I like in this season. I don't think there's a dud after this for quite some time, so it's kind of nice. So
there's only one more story after this one.
But I was sort of counting a bit of season 5 in here as I go. So I think for a little while we're onto a golden run here, really, in sort of Doctor Who stories in that sort of term as we head into the monster season, and we come out of this one. So I think this is. I think the season's really kicked in at this point. And you've got some great location stuff. You've got some great storytelling in this one. It's not a saggy 6 as we often refer to them as. I think you've got some great guest list in here that's playing well. So you know what? Faceless ones for me, unreservedly 8.
Ooh.
Look at him firing the big scores off now.
I know. Normally that kind of build-up is, a 5.
Here's one I adore and watch weekly. So for me, it's a 3.
That didn't happen.
Well, I'm not far behind you. I am, as ever, somewhere in the middle of you two, and I give the Faceless ones a 7.5.
Wow.
Which gives the Faceless ones a 22.5. Ooh.
That's surprisingly higher than I thought in the rankings.
No, I think it deserves that. It's really not the worst story of the season. Doesn't
No.
it much lower than that?
It's a goodie, and a Clayton t-shirt. So we are now heading towards the series finale, which is Doctor Who and the Evil of the Daleks. So we are in a junk shop full of old Victoriana, which makes me think of Jason.
Oh, you must have thought long and hard about that one. Okay, so here we go. It's just felt like a very long season. 9th story of the season here, and we're into...
We started recording the review 9 hours ago.
They've found the episodes since we started recording this. They've watched them. They're on DVD and everything.
I'm not being funny. I'm surprised we didn't lose one about it and get it animated, because I kind of think that would have been quite the nice twist, actually. But here we go. We're at the season finale now, and surprisingly, we're back with the Daleks again, which clearly is a great way to end any season. There's a reason for it. I'll come to that in a moment. This story is a perceived fan classic, and it's often quoted as one of the most wanted stories to be returned from a missing episode's perspective. And it's got a very, very liked opinion out there in the world of fandom. This is a very, very good story. The Daleks were brought back because this was going to be the very last Dalek story. Terry Nation had decided that he wanted to flaunt them out into America and bob them around there. So he was going to make an American series, and that was why we were going to see this sort of epic end for the Daleks. And the Evil of the Daleks, I think it's got some really nice touches in there. We get introduced to a brand new companion. And I think, again, we see the Doctor and Jamie sort of working at their very best throughout this story. And in some respects, this story is a big test for Jamie, because the way that the Doctor's behaving through this one, it's giving Jamie doubts about, which side is the Doctor on here. So I think there's lots and lots and lots of positives. There's a couple of negatives in here, I won't lie to you. And again, I think because I can't see the visuals on this, and just to note, we are actually recording this pre the animation coming out. So I've watched this on telesnaps. Again, I would probably want to see some visuals on this. There are some beautifully written bits for the Daleks, and I think David Whittaker, again, is delivering in spades some of what I don't think Terry Nation ever could with his own creations. So lots going for this one. Love this one. Evil of the Daleks, we're here. Love to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Oh, thank you. A lot of what I was going to say you have already covered about this being supposedly the last Dalek story. A couple of other things I would just add in there around the Daleks. This is the first time you get to see the sort of Dalek Prime, the Emperor, that only really appeared in comics before, up until this point, but weirdly had also appeared in an episode of Thunderbirds. So there is a picture, and you can Google this because it is true. There is a picture of the Dalek Prime on a piece of paper in the Thunderbirds episode, season 1, The man from MI5.
Sorry, so what? There's a picture. Well, like on the sideboard.
No, there's a scene. There's a scene where they're going through some papers in an office, and on one of them there is a drawing of the Dalek.
What's the episode again?
It's called The Man from MI5.
So for clarity for the viewer at home,
Yes.
in the Thunderbirds, they're looking through some files, and there's a picture of the Dalek, the big-headed one from the cartoons.
Yeah.
But the big-headed one doesn't appear in this. It's the Emperor. It's a different.
It's from this. It's this one. This Dalek. It does appear on a piece of paper. There's a picture of it.
Oh,
there we go.
That's something to look out for.
But because you're right that he was going to take it to America, he wanted to sort of do a Dalek spin-off. But yeah, so that there is that weird crossover, which I was not aware of until I was doing my research into this story. I can see Jason is Googling it as we speak.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the Terry Nation launching his spin-off series is terribly linked to Thunderbirds, though. He was pitching it to the American networks, wasn't he? Was it called The Destroyers, I believe?
He was. It was, in fact, The Destroyers. You're quite right. And he was getting traction, but I think even at this point, I don't think he'd actually sold it to the States. And quite possibly probably regrets his decision, which is probably why Evil got a repeat at the further on, just a year after it was shown, because at that point, I think he realized the mistake he'd made.
Because there was talk of doing a Cyberman versus Dalek story in the Wheel in Space slot. And I think that was scuppered by Terry being like, no, I'm trying to sell this abroad. And that's why Evil and Power are going to remain missing, because that put a block on selling them abroad. So only the initial 2 sales, I think, for both stories went through, because there was a block on selling Dalek material, and they were the most recent Dalek material, so they hadn't been sold abroad as much as the other stuff. We've cut completely around discussing the actual story, which is an odd thing, isn't it? Because it's a long thing, and it does have quite a few winds, quite a few twists. I would say there are some major flaws, I think, with the story itself, and I would love to sort of shy away from that, but I think I should address it because I'm contrary. The sort of odd thing of them trying to specifically test Jamie rather than anyone else doesn't make a huge amount of sense. I mean, it's a little bit like the Wheel in Space, I suppose, when the Cybermen take that very prolonged plot just to basically land on a wheel. It's like, just land on the wheel. They're like, oh, phaser 1, we're going to do this. But David's slightly done that with the Daleks here. It's kind of like, well, we'll steal the TARDIS to lure the Doctor to here, and then we'll have a box with a picture, and then we'll knock him out here, and we'll take him out here. It's like, could you not just rock up at Gatwick Airport and grab him? I mean, you're going to some extreme lengths here. And then they sort of spend all the time working out what it is to be human, and then go, well, actually, scrap that. That told us what it is to be Dalek. And it's like, but it's quite obvious. You sort of tell, you know, I'm not sure what they're trying to discern, because they know they must. It's quite an obvious thing to work out what someone's compassion is or someone's humanity is, and it does seem a bit strange that there's a huge amount of time for both lots sort of discussing that and deciding that. And there's the very strange sort of subplot with, and I'm going to forget his character's name, but Bridget Forsyth's fiance in this, where he's sort of Dalekized, and he's the one that's been who kidnapped Victoria. There are lots of sort of threads in it, I think, that if you watch an episode a week, and I obviously Doctor Who is designed to be watched episode a week. In 1967, you would have watched it with your Sunday dinner, tea, whatever you're calling it, and you know it would have just been 25 minutes of entertainment. It wasn't designed for us to analyse 55 years, and that's fine. As an episodic thing, it's fine, and there's lots of great things and lots of great moments and lots of things I love. But as a sort of continued logical story, it doesn't quite hold together for me.
It's quite epic in the scope, though, isn't it? Because they start off at Gatwick and then they go back to this mansion in 1866, and then they're on Skaro, and you've got the scale of this thing. But you're right in the fact that it seems weird that they say that Jamie is the most human person because he's travelled with the Doctor, and you kind of go, really? Well, how does that work out? And I think it was Maxtable was the character you were talking about, which is the one.
No.
Is it not that one?
Is he not Terrell? Arthur Terrell.
Oh yeah. And I thought if you watch later Dalek stories, that they were already sort of imbued with this. We must obey. We must. I'm not quite sure what they're trying to get at with that Dalek factor and why they need a human in order to get to it. That is the woolly bit for me. It's kind of like, no, don't necessarily understand all of that side of it.
I mean, obviously,
unless one of you wants to explain it to me.
No, I mean, I can't. I don't think I can explain it, James. But I can just say that I think, from my perspective, the human factor is the thing they're trying to grasp here, because they're trying to work out whether or not, having that in them is going to make them that much more, much more conquering, I suppose, as they go forward. Jamie, in a way, actually, in some respects, because of the innocence of Jamie, and there is an innocence in the character because of his history and because of where he's come from. And obviously he's seen things in his travels with the Doctor, but there is an innocence there. And potentially that isn't the wrong thing for this to be in this story, because they're looking for something in there that isn't menacing, because they clearly think that the human factor is the thing that they're missing. I don't disagree with it. I don't think it's a heavy plot hole, but I think it's an interesting one.
But then Camel is completely devoted to Victoria, isn't he? And he's it's a really sweet character, and it's quite a sad end for Camel when he gets done in by Maxtable. It's I can see what the point is, and you can do the trial and the trial of combat. You can do all that, and the payoff obviously is the humanized Daleks, because then you get that sort of juxtaposition of them being a little bit like children, and it's fun. It's another take on it, because the Daleks is 4 years in here, so you've got to think of something new to do each time. And I think sort of the first three stories you can see that they've changed the pitch on it, and then the fourth. But you've got to keep thinking of something new to do with them, and that's a new twist. And obviously the Emperor is the big twist. And you've got the giant daddy of the Daleks, and he looks great, and the design is incredible. I think and the voice and I mean, Bad Wolf Bless does steal that, doesn't it? It does steal the moment of the reveal, and here's the Emperor Dalek, and there's no shame in that, because it was a new generation for it. Mm-hmm. But this is what originates that, and I think that's really important. And
it's a visual I really would like to see. Appreciate the set that surrounds the Emperor, if you like, is a little basic in itself, but I think that would have been quite impressive on screen. And the voice is exactly right. You're right. They did take that, and they lifted it almost like for like. But that's part of it. They did an amazing piece of tech there to get Peter Hawkins's voice to come out and be quite as that. And again, and that's one of the things they use as the clip for the animation. So I love the thought of there having been an Emperor Dalek behind this all along. It's a bit different to the Davros thing, and that's further on down the line anyway. But the fact that there was an Emperor brain or a prime that was sitting behind them makes absolute sense, and that it's on Skaro, and that it's a big part of the narrative. So I accept that. I love the fact actually that the Doctor gives the human Daleks a name. So you've got Alpha, Beta, and Omega. And I love that as well, because that's just giving them that little bit more personality.
I mean, you get similar themes in more recent, Doctor Who, like the Daleks Take Manhattan, where they're trying to introduce the human factor into to Daleks because they say that humans always survive and the Daleks always get defeated. It's not, it's not something that it's just in this story. We see it, in other ones. It's just a bit hazy for me about how and why they're going about it. I mean, I do love the ending, like you say, when the Daleks are like children and they're rebelling, and and again you get this sort of epic battle at the end where you think it's that the sort of emperor has been defeated, but from what I read, it was Sidney Newman that said, we don't want to kill off the Daleks. We let's leave the door open to bring them back. And he was one of the ones that didn't want to see something like the Daleks in Doctor Who, but in the end he recognised that they were very popular and wanted to at least allow the opportunity for them to come back.
I suppose, but with any monster, it's always like Kathy Beale in EastEnders. You just can't kill them off because they can always find a way of coming back. Do you know what I mean?
Coming back younger.
Coming back regenerated.
Are you likening Kathy Beale to a Dalek?
I wouldn't even think. They're all the pre-Hartnell Doctor is Tish Dean in Dimensions in Time. I'm telling you, the real thing.
But it's kind of interesting, actually, because even though they say final end, he does say it. There is a cut back, and there is just that little glimmer. They just leave the door open just a little bit, and actually, they were probably quite right to do that. Although, having said that, in reality, the way that the series moves around in time, even if you'd not had that scene, I think you could quite easily have read them back in. I don't think it wouldn't have been a problem for it.
I mean, it's quite Patrick's very somber. I think in the last episode, it's an epic feel to it, and he references taking to his home planet, and that's quite rare for that to be something at that point mentioned, so it is quite a somber thing, and obviously he realizes that Victoria's father sacrificed himself and they're going to take Victoria. It is quite an epic, and it's quite rare because Doctor Who's obviously hasn't quite done season finales as such. There's been an end of the season, so I think the Time Medley, you get the bit where they look to the camera and it's the end, there's a bit of star, and it's like, it's in the even sort of Reign of Terror, there's a sort of not quite an end, but there's a sort of end of season sort of War Machine just finishes, doesn't it, really, with them going. So it's the first time I think you can say actually this season has built throughout. Yeah. To a point where the last episode of this is like, wow, this is what we would in modern terms call a finale. I even have to shout out some of the cast. I mean, Bridget Forsyth is a ledge, and it's a strange thing because it's a really nice part, but also a sort of strangely incidental part in some ways. But Bridget Forsyth, Joe Robonton, I think sparkles. I think that she gives a great turn. As Molly, Marius Goring. It's interesting that you can have a story like this with Windsor Davies in the cast, and he's not even the star of this.
He's not in it very much either, is he?
It's not.
No. It's an anti-Welsh gender.
We that gets rectified in future seasons.
Yes. I do have a little showbiz thing around Bridget, because Neil, my other half, has worked with Bridget before, and was talking about this story, and she said it's for all the different things that she's done in her career, this is the one thing that she gets the most fan mail from, and she said it doesn't even exist for anyone to watch, but she still gets loads of fan mail for this story.
I think it is the funny that my Bridget Forsyth anecdote while we're on the run. She came and did an event with us, quite a few years back, and paid her at the end, and she said, "If I'd known I was going to be paid, I'd have smiled more." That's such an incredible response to doing the event. But she was lovely. She was great. I think it is funny because when you look at someone who's had a career as long as Bridget has had. Yeah. And I mean, for me, she's Thelma. It's likely, or whatever happens, the likely lads. It's incredible that you would get the most attention from something that you did for 4 weeks that people can't see. I mean, the funny thing is as well with Evil of the Daleks, episode 2 is the one that we can see. And it's great because it's Deb's first episode on that hand. But on the other hand, it isn't the best of the 7. I think if we had 6 or 7, it would be like, wow. I think 2 is... I think with any of these things, I think if you've got a 6-parter, episode 1's going to be like a cracking opener, and 2's always the sort of just calm the pace down before we launch back onto the rest of the story. I haven't done my Michael Craze anecdote. You didn't prompt me, did you?
Oh no!
Let's have it. Let's hear it.
As the official autobiographer of Deborah Watling, this links up here. Debbie's first kiss, and if you've read the book, you'll know this story. So if you haven't read the book, read the book. Fight from Phantom. Some on the shelf there we can send out. Michael Craze was Debbie's first kiss.
Aww.
Who knew? Well, if you read the book, you'd know. That's a nice link there. So it's kind of funny to think what it'd been like if you'd had, not because they kissed already. I mean, it wasn't Debbie's last kiss by any means. It would have been funny to see what Ben and Victoria would have been, actually. That could have been an interesting pairing. But yeah, there's a Doctor Who fact for you.
Not with Jason around. He wouldn't have any hanky-panky in the TARDIS.
I wouldn't have done, no. And it does, obviously, this story does then set the scene for us for season 5 because it introduces the character of Victoria. And she's left alone at the end of the episode, and the Doctor takes her on board the TARDIS, and the rest, as they say, is history. And absolutely the right choice to play this part, I think.
Yeah, completely. I think it suits. I think you really get the same. It's interesting though, because you don't get an awful lot of Dr. Jamie Victoria in this story. You don't even get a massive amount of Jamie Victoria. It's sort of quite late on. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily guess that she was going to be someone that would be kept on until quite late on, and so it's an interesting turn. Yeah, I think Evil is the sum of lots of great parts rather than being a whole great thing. That makes sense.
But curiously, I think it works as a sum of all those parts, and I think that's probably what makes this story.
And of course, if we got a spray paint out, we could give Rusty a black dome and he could become an evil Dalek.
Not on your life would I ever put any black near the dome of that. Not a chance. This is proper Chase and master plan. Thank you very much. And he stays.
If we broke off his sucker, we could put a sieve on it, and he could have a Dalek brain scoop thing from Power.
I mean, if I were in the cosplaying mood, I could probably be doing new bits to Rusty every time we do one of these videos, but I'm not going to.
Slip me a monkey and I'll customize your Dalek.
Annie Walker looks down on you in distaste at this point, I have to say.
Yeah, Bet Gilroy nods along with approval. So I think, are we ready to hit?
Just one more.
Oh, he's got a fact. He's got a fact.
There's a late one.
Hang on. This isn't a fact about the forthcoming animation having a poster of Gary Lineker on the wall in the cafe or something, is it?
No. This is one for Jason, because this is another Doctor Who episode to feature music from the Beatles, which Jason will know. Some TV channels, because of the rights issue, actually just cut those scenes out. So this is another one that's got the Beatles music in it. So depending on where you watch it, you may or may not experience that.
It's in the Tricolore.
It is. Mm. And it was cut out I believe, on some of the audio versions, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think early doors it was harder to clear than it is now.
Mm-hmm. But yes, James is right. I've chuckled at that because that was quite interesting when we were doing the watch along of the Chase some time back.
We're all like, "Oh, look, the Beatles," and Jason's going, "It's not in my version."
I think you're right. I think some scores are probably needed now. We've got into that kind of storytelling.
I think that sounds very exciting. I'm going to do the first score.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm going to set the tone for this.
Okay, then.
It's interesting. I've sort of wavered, and this is the one story where my scores sort of flickered about quite a bit. I'm doing a Jason hand. It's flickered about quite a lot, and I on one hand, I'm not sure. Is it like the out and out classic that it is? My eyebrows are falling out now. That's an eyelash. I don't. It's been so long. We started this a week ago. I just want to let me out here.
Whose idea was this to do this in one sitting?
I don't know. I was Dalekized at the start of it, and it's all coming out now. So I wasn't sure. I don't think it's 100% golden classic. I think it's got lots of very good stuff and lots of very strong things in it. I think the cast are great, and I think a lot of the visuals are very strong. And it's a shame we can't see the moving visuals, and I think that would enhance things tenfold. But we were fortunate that we can see an awful lot of it. So anyway, I am giving Evil of the Daleks 8.5.
Some very generous scoring there.
Well,
I'm a generous guy. I'm loving, huggable, generous. That's just me, my nature.
Yeah. Contrary doesn't come into it at all, does it?
Not this late at night.
I'll go next then, and we can have Jason with the final reveal. I am once again in total agreement with Paul in the fact that I have scored this 8.5, and this is, probably top of my list for wanting all these episodes back with this particular story, because some of the yes, it does have its faults, but I'd love to see some of the visuals for this story. So yeah, 8.5 from me.
Okay, and then it falls to me then to set the final score here, and I don't have to think very long and hard about this. This is a great Doctor Who story. It's by no means, it's not going to be a 10 here, so I'm going to lay it down there before we go. But this has got a lot about it. I love David Whittaker's script in this one, and I love the whole human factor. Yes, there are a couple of plot pulls in it here and there, but it's classic Doctor and Jamie, classic Daleks, decent script, introduction of Victoria. 7 episodes doesn't feel too long. So, on the whole, I am going to sit very squarely, and I'm going to score the Evil of the Daleks at 9.
Oh, a 9.
But I think that's the highest score of the
highest score.
It is indeed. And we've had quite the mixed season. It's fair to say we've had quite the mixed season here. And 9 is the highest score, I think, that any of us have given this season. And it's interesting that there's no 10s in here. But if you think about this has genuinely been a season of change, realistically. And, we've had a new Doctor. We've said goodbye to Bill, which, in itself is a difficult thing, because actually I absolutely adore William Hartnell's portrayal as the Doctor. So much of this season is lost as well. So we're robbed of some fantastic visuals here, in my humble opinion. And although I can't wait to see the new animation of Evil, I'm looking forward to it actually, because I'm hoping it'll just give me a different perspective on the story. This is a season or two. It's a bit of a mixed season, and I kind of like it really on the whole. I don't know what you guys are thinking about it.
James isn't thinking anything about it. He just looks a bit bemused. I don't know what that is. I do. I agree. I think it's Doctor Who hits in hindsight in some ways. Towards the end of season 3, it hits a troubled period. I think it's mainly a production fault that it hits quite a troubled run. And I think the ratings sort of have a little bit of a waver with the public. Things aren't going great. It's not entirely impossible that it could have all gone, really. And there's a Doctor Who miracle, isn't there, I think, at the start of season 4. I think the production team get that things need to change. They get what needs to change, and you get Patrick Troughton. And I think that's the biggest thing you can say is that Doctor Who is saved by bringing in Pat Troughton. We wouldn't have the show. Obviously, William Hartnell makes the legend, and Patrick Troughton is the one that makes sure the legend continues. And I think full kudos there.
Yeah, because it could have been all over if someone else had come into the role, or if Pat had not been good as the Doctor, they would have said, well, this is an experiment that's not work. Let's pull it. I feel this season, yes, it has its bumps in the road, but that's just settling. They've changed the main character, so you have to give them time to work the show around that. And I think there are production issues with the three companions and things like that, where they're probably just going, right, we've got the Doctor, we're happy with the Doctor, he's doing amazingly well, how can we just make the rest of the show fit that? And I think by the time you get to this story, and you start to see that, and especially when you go into season 5, and you've got some really great stories in season 5.
So, scores on the doors. It's all ready to roll. Are you excited to see the grand finale?
We are at the final end.
The final end. Before Jason gets axed. So, in 9th position on 12 points, we have the Highlanders. 8th position with 16 points is the Underwater Menace. 7th position on 18 points is the Macra Terra. 6th place with 20.5 is the Smugglers. Unfair. Hashtag justice for smugglers. The halfway point, 5th place is 10th Planet on 21.5. 4th place, we have the Faceless ones with 22.5. 3rd place is the Power of the Daleks on 23. Our runner-up in 2nd place with 24 points is the Moon Base, which means our season winner on 26 is Evil of the Daleks. A worthy winner?
Yes, most definitely a worthy winner. No question of that at all in my eyes. I think it's the pick of the bunch, and I like the fact that Moonbase is up there in 2nd place as well, and I like the Power of the Daleks is represented in the top 3. So I think actually the top 3 about right for me.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me on the long journey through season 4. And thank you for still watching. And we shall see you again soon. Bye-bye.